And
Excellent.
awesome.
All right, welcome to the September 5th meeting of our AI task force. As always, task force members and technical advisors should be showing up as panelists in the Zoom. If you're not, please get in touch with Scott or Dan, who can promote you. Easiest promotion ever. Meeting is being recorded. You can access recordings of prior meetings on the AI task force website via the Governor's Office of Policy Innovation in the future. Okay, today's plan. Today we begin the final phase of our work together. In the 4 meetings we have scheduled between now and the end of October, we will turn what we've learned and discussed over the past several months into a set of recommendations for the governor and the legislature. I'm going to spend a few minutes up top here previewing what the rest of the task force work will look like over the next few meetings. And then we'll spend the remainder of our time today turning it over to you all to talk through the preliminary recommendations from our 4 subgroups: healthcare, education, workforce, and the public sector, with a short break in the middle. As you'll see in a moment, we will get a chance to discuss the draft recs from the remaining 2 groups at our next meeting later in September. And we aim to adjourn on time by 2 p.m. Okay, so to get us started, and I think, yep, there we go. I'm going to spend a couple of minutes just putting this meeting in perspective with the larger task force roadmap, and then run through the plan for today and the remaining 3 meetings. You'll hopefully remember this slide, which lays out our roadmap for reaching the October 31st deadline. This winter and spring, the work of the task force was exploratory in nature, and you heard testimony from local practitioners and national experts about AI's current and future impacts on Maine. In parallel, 6 subgroups met to think about AI's impact in each of these areas. And as you know, these groups were charged with narrowing down the conversation and drafting preliminary recommendations. And now we will begin to pull all those ideas together. We have 4 more meetings scheduled. Today's meeting, which I'll go into in just a minute, the September 26th meeting, when we'll have a chance to meet in person in Augusta, and we'll plan to cover recommendations from the 2 remaining subgroups that we won't have time to get to today, and then spend time talking about how to begin prioritizing the list of recommendations. This will also be a chance to go over any revisions that might come out in the conversation today, and more to come from staff on the logistics. October 8th. This is when we'll plan to look at a complete draft of the full report, which you'll see an outline of in just a second. That meeting will be our chance to step back, look at the full picture, and make sure the pieces hold together and that they reflect your work. October 24th, our final meeting, where you'll see the fully designed and completed version of the report. And as these meetings are happening, staff will be working to pull together drafts, ID, and track down pictures, profiles, and quotes to supplement the text and design a final report for your approval. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Okay, speaking of the final report, we wanted to give the group a preview of what the final report is going to end up looking like. On this slide, you can see a list of sections that we're planning to include. We start with a letter from the co-chairs, which we'll spend some time at a future meeting brainstorming all together so it reflects everybody's viewpoints. And we'll have a table of contents, an executive summary, an introduction section that includes a description of the task force process. And then the meat of the report will be organized according to 3 charges in the governor's executive order. We're planning on slotting each subgroup's recommendations in under one of these 3 charges so that we can try to be as responsive as possible to what the governor asked us to consider. We'll have a section calling out some specific areas where Maine could be a national leader, which we're drawing directly from your conversations. And finally, we'll have a series of appendices, some of which you can see here. So take a minute, maybe leave that up for a second, just take a minute to see those appendices. Okay. All right. So now turning to today's meeting, I'm really excited to hear from 4 of our 6 subgroups today. For each group, we've asked a representative to do a few minutes of level setting and background at the top, and then we'll have 25 minutes set aside for discussion. As you can see, some questions And you can see some of the questions to help guide the conversation on this slide. And these are, consistent with the way that we've been thinking about this in the past. So I don't think any of these are shockers to you. So this should be a good way to help guide it. Um, the goal in the discussion is not to wordsmith every sentence, but to make sure that the ideas are all there and that we haven't missed anything. And that the group can, live with the recommendations as they stand. We're really trying to really galvanize consensus here, and anything that kind of gets in the weeds, we want to hear your critical editorial comments, but maybe offline, and really focus on the big picture items here. Okay, that's it from me for now. And with that in mind, we're going to get started with the healthcare subgroup. And I'm going to throw it over to Dan Nygren to kick us off. Dan?
Great. Thanks, Mary. So I'm here as a stand-in for Lisa, who I think couldn't be here today. We had a great set of discussions in our healthcare subgroup. And as you can see, we've got 4 sort of high-level recommendations for our group. And I'll just talk through them each individually. The first is around a little bit of what you just mentioned, Mary, around how the state of Maine might become a leader, actually considering our rural environment in this healthcare space. We've got a lot of opportunities that lend themselves well for us to show how technology and AI in particular can really foster an improved healthcare offering for our residents. And we've got structures already within the state that could help serve as a starting point for some of this innovation. And we should really take advantage of those and build on them, and essentially serve as a model for how AI might serve well in rural communities around the country. So that was the first suggestion. The second is one around training and education, and overall literacy, really. I feel it even within my own organization at Maine Health, just around not only rolling out all of the technologies and the workflows and so on, but how do we help our own team members learn about what AI means, how one goes about using it in the day-to-day functions that we do, and how to be conscious of what the risks are and how to look at some of these technologies with a critical eye as they apply in our day-to-day work. And so this aspect of training and education and familiarity with the lingo even is going to be incredibly important to demystify, frankly, some of what we're seeing now. And I think I'm expecting to be a recurring theme as we go through the other work groups as well. There's obviously a lot of regulation within the healthcare environment, and I think the application of AI within healthcare is going to be no exception to that rule. And so we should be as ready as possible to address those, both with pathways for how AI can be applied within healthcare environments, and to do so responsibly, ethically, and safely. But to also ensure that we're not approving things that maybe might not be approved, if you will. There's going to be so many new tools and technologies coming our way. Some of them are not going to be appropriate, and so I think we have to have some regulatory structures in place to serve as guardrails and safeguards so that we only allow the right things through. And then finally, again, something we've talked about in our meetings is the need for good, robust infrastructure around the state to support AI and its application. I think primarily this is going to focus around internet access, but it's also even basics like cellular access throughout the state. And so this is going to be, again, I would imagine a recurring theme in other work groups as well. So I'll stop there. Hopefully I've done my my stand-in role well. And Mary, let me know if there's more that I can add.
Yeah, I think you did a great job, Dan. Really appreciate that summary. So again, we have the questions that we're really probing for discussion here. Do these recommendations align with governor's executive order and the overarching goals? Do they cover the key opportunities? Are there gaps? Anything still missing that we haven't considered? And are they framed at the right level? Really appropriate for a task force report to guide state policy without being overly detailed or prescriptive. So I'll open it up for discussion.
Can I ask, I wonder, Mary, if you or David have thought about, how are you thinking about the group's conversation around literacy and training? Because I think Dan's exactly right. You're going to see it in our recommendation in a couple of minutes, and it'll probably roll through all of these recommendations. And I think we've talked about this before. I don't think the answer is, everyone figure it out on their own. So I don't know what you're thinking about and when that kind of slots in. Is that issue gonna be like in each one of these groups as we talk about it, or is it more in the wrap up discussions when we get near the, when we've thrown out all 6 and we realize it's a trend and then we tackle it? Just a process question, really.
Yeah, so Ryan, this is diving into the how, but maybe Dan can give that a go and talk about what, summarize what the group had mentioned around this briefly. But I think if we mapping out those more granular steps might be something that that would take us off the tack for today. But I'll defer to Scott or Dan around whether that's in scope.
Yeah, and I'm not looking for the deep dive. It's really just, it's a big issue.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Dan, do you want to touch on that?
I can jump in here, Mary. And I think, Ryan, that's a really valid question. And maybe this is one to come back on at the end of today's call. And if you all collectively say, this is a consistent theme that crosses all of these topics, let's integrate this recommendation. Instead of being multiple ones, let's integrate it into a standalone recommendation. I think that's a great outcome and exactly the purpose of going through this all today.
Perfect. Exactly what I was looking for. Thanks.
So maybe we should take that across the board and maybe put an I next to those recommendations that might be integrated with others. And so we would select that as, number 2 as something with an I next to it. Dan, do you want to provide? Yeah.
Thanks, Mary. One thing that I would just add, and look, I'm no expert in AI education. I'm learning as we go along with all of you. But one thing that I've seen as helpful so far in our experience is teaching by example, for lack of a better description, just showing people what's possible as it relates to healthcare or our organizations at Maine Health. And that usually helps to allow people to sort of put it into context. It also gets their imagination going, which I think is helpful and can allow them to say, oh, well, maybe I could use that same tool to do this or that, which is great. That's the kind of, innovation that we're looking for. So maybe that can be sort of woven into this theme if we're going to pull it out of each of the individual subgroups. I think this notion of teaching by example is one that will be probably helpful in this space.
That's great, Jay.
So I think it's been covered, but I just want to reiterate I do think we're going to have some overarching themes where, does it go in the public sector? Does it go in education or what have you? And And it's certainly, and they're ones, so I don't know if we make a overarching recommendation and then the subgroup recommendations, but it's, it's the infrastructure is certainly, I think every subgroup, if they didn't bring it up, it is part of it. And then education. So it would, of course, come up with education, but I don't want it to appear that other sectors don't also have a role in educating. Like we all have that role in educating ourselves or what have you. So how we capture that without repeating each other's recommendations in each category, or do we end up with some overarching recommendations and then some that are specific to our subgroup?
I think also that there should, I would advocate that there should be this recommendation in each subgroup, because ultimately the operational outcomes of that may be really different. That it's maybe not one training fits all kind of thing. Because we've talked about the fact that there's just a proliferation of AI tools out there. There's not really a gelled or galvanized community yet around this is the AI tool for healthcare, or this is, and it's likely to be hundreds of tools before we're done. So I think that there just has to be this dynamic and continuous training landscape associated with different groups that are group specific to some extent, but there is also the opportunity to have some broad-based introductory training that could span and integrate across all groups. Chris, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, just building on what you were just saying, Mary, I think one thing we could do, we could imagine there being as part of the executive summary, a section on cross-cutting themes or unlocking opportunities that transcend all the recommendations. And then within each section, we could almost close each section with a sort of a contextual application of that cross-cutting theme. So sort of bring education into the workforce domain, bring it into the healthcare domain, to Dan's earlier point. And then I'll just offer two other observations with respect to the framing questions here. One is that the pre-read did this really well, and I hope we continue to do it. Each of these recommendations, I'm speaking specifically to the question around, are they framed at the right level? I think it's made more powerful with an example or two. So as we sort of build this out further, because most of the power of this report will be in the hands of people who are reading it, who haven't gone through the journey that we all just have gone through. So I think really important to illustrate with very specific examples, and hopefully some that can sort of survive a little bit of the test of time over the next year as the technology, quickly accelerates. Those are my thoughts so far.
Great. Excellent.
Mary, just a quick thought from the other side as you're chairing this conversation. I think this conversation is really healthy and helpful. It reflects on the drafting, and I think having those thoughts in our heads is good. And I think retaining those thoughts as we sort of move through the entire drafting process. What I would encourage us to not do is sort of get sort of mired in the drafting, and make sure that we're really focused on the risks, the opportunities, the issues, and the gaps, and especially that gap area. Have we missed anything? And I do think that we're going to see some repeat themes, and there'll be an art form in terms of how we make sure that those themes are brought out in the drafting. But let's also not lose sight of the overall objective. This is our first pass through of all these recommendations. And does anyone think we've missed anything? Is there anything that's a little off base? Is there anything that doesn't feel just right? Is, I think, also an operative question that we want to make sure we stay focused on today.
Great points, Dave. Nicole?
Thank you. I'm not sure if this is something that's missed, and I'll admit here I don't know a lot about insurance regulation, Maine care rates, things like that. And it was sort of mentioned in the sections on healthcare, but from a state level, I think it's really important that we make sure healthcare providers are reimbursed or that insurance companies are required to pay for certain types of services because this isn't just going to happen charitably necessarily. And to me, it felt like it maybe needs to be more explicit that the state has a role in A, our reimbursement rates for Maine care, and B, the ways we regulate insurance companies. Two things that I do not know a lot about, but I think it maybe needs to be a little more upfront and center that that's what's going to enable entities to do this work financially. Or maybe I'm wrong, but that's something that came to mind.
I think that's great, and I think it's inherent in the third recommendation. But maybe we may make a note to just double check that those 2 points are covered adequately as we
I
draft.
could,
Go ahead, Dan.
I could jump ahead of Chris and Sam real quick. Nicole, just to clarify, do you mean to ensure that if a provider uses AI to render a diagnosis or to assist them in the care of a patient, and in some ways that becomes a billable action, that we want to have some kind of guidance along those lines? Is that what you mean?
I think so. Like, I think about complaints that I've gotten where folks want to do telehealth, but the institution's not offering it because they can't charge for the, you came in our building fee. I don't remember what that's called, but it's been an impediment. And I think it's, I mean, I hate to be super critical of our state agencies, but if it takes 2, 3, 4 years to change reimbursement rates, are we doing that? Are we able to keep up with the ways that care is going to be delivered and ensure that the payment will be forthcoming if we think it's, prudent to do so? I think the times it currently takes us to adjust those things is not lined up with the rapid innovation we're facing.
I do think that's a great point. And as Mary said, I think that's probably wrapped up in number 3 here on the list. Because just to play devil's advocate, I could envision an AI at some point in the future not needing any human intervention at all. And if Maine Health, sponsors an AI that will, it'll be on a website and will render a diagnosis for you. And oh, by the way, we're going to bill your insurance company after you get that diagnosis. Obviously, I'm making all of this up, but having guardrails around this stuff is going to be important.
I think it's a great point and something we should certainly sharpen our pencils around in that area. Chris, did you have your hand up for this point, or is it still up for the last point?
I was going to respond to Dave's call, but let's let Sam weigh in since I've already spoken.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. There's a lot to like in these recommendations. I think one thing that I saw to some extent, but I would like to see more of, is an explicit acknowledgement of the importance of engaging workers in all facets of the healthcare system with all of these different points, specifically with training. I think it's very important for them to have a strong voice in the training materials as they're chosen, so that it's not just coming from management, but it's actually responding to what they're seeing on the ground. So I'd love to see, without getting into wordsmithing, I'd love to see that as a priority as we look at these recommendations.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it should really be healthcare professionals at all levels with some stakeholder engagement. Yeah, I think that's good. Okay. Other points? Warren?
It's just on that point that Sam just made. Are there particular areas in the healthcare industry where we have shortages where maybe AI training and focus would be most beneficial? Like I'm thinking, in my investment life, we're invested in a business that does methadone treatment for opioid use disorder, and we have a massive shortage of nurses. And so we're doing a lot of work right now to arm our nurses with the appropriate AI tools to streamline the documentation stuff that they do, so that we can get them more focused on the care aspects of what they do. And the reason why I mention this is that Sam makes a really good point that engaging workers in this is important, but there's also an overlay of just where does the state have a shortage, and is there any way to use AI to specifically address that gap, especially in healthcare where there's just so much need. So
I think that's a great point. And the shortage of nurses is, not unique to Maine, it's everywhere. And we had some discussion about this certainly in the subgroup, as well as, other areas, pinch points like, appointment times and being able to see providers and things like that where AI could be helpful. So I think that's a great point. Chris, do you want to chime in? And then we should probably think about moving on to the next section.
I think to Dave's question about are there gaps, and this is a question to the group because it may not be something that there's consensus around. And I wonder if one of our positions for this particular aspect of the executive order, or several, and maybe it's even a cross-cutting theme, is the notion of partnership with private industry and sort of the voice of the very folks that are building the technologies. Is that a gap here? It's implied in number 1 here, and it's the notion of partnerships is introduced in number 4. But do we want to think about a position as part of our recommendations is that the state can't do it alone. The state needs partnership, particularly partnership with industry, to be in the vanguard and to do and fully sort of realize the potential of AI and all that it can bring, and also to potentially control and manage risk. So that's more of a question in response to Dave's question.
I do think, and Dan can correct me, that as a national innovation hub really does apply being partnered with folks as first adopters and, really being able to be at that forefront, not necessarily Maine businesses, but can be Maine businesses, but really drawing from every place that innovation could come into the state and be helpful. So I think that's there. I think if you're hedging down the line of whether there should be more language about facilitating that in some way, then that maybe is a deeper level of conversation under that first recommendation. Dan, am I about in the right place on this, or is there?
Mary, assuming you mean Dan Nygren, yes, I think, Chris, I absolutely think that it's a relevant call out. And what I'm wondering is whether or not it's going to be potentially one of these cross-cutting themes as opposed to just living in the healthcare bucket. Because I do think there'll likely be opportunities in the others as well. But I do think, like I said, I agree that it's a good mention.
So maybe another little integrative eye next to number 1.
Well, actually, I like that, Mary, because I think we'll also see the notion of experimentation or innovation and pilots in all of these recommendations. Mm-hmm. So it's that integrative eye with this, if we choose to do it, and we can decide maybe in a future meeting, to make a sort of explicit partner to do it and accelerate it recommendation too.
Yeah. Well, let's see how the rest of the topics come out and figure out exactly, get a better hone in on that a little bit better. Are there other discussion points? Other things that people are thinking about? We still have some time before we switch to the next topic, but we started this a little early, so I want to be mindful of, how much time we're spending on each one and make sure that we don't short anybody down the line. Jay?
There we go. It probably does touch on it, but the recommendations, maybe all of this helps to safeguard Mainers from negative impacts of AI, but it's not, there's nothing explicitly written within the recommendations. I think all of this probably leads to, this all looks like great ways for us to take advantage of AI. But I don't, and it probably is helping so that people don't get taken advantage of by AI. But the questions we were answering, it's not necessarily hits you over the head with the preliminary recommendations. Does that make sense?
So a gap might be that it hasn't really considered protections for healthcare.
Right. Like in each category, it's implicit in the sense, the regulatory landscape, making sure an AI literacy, improve role. So it is touched upon, but anyway, that I think we could probably move on. But it's something to consider as we go through each one of these.
Yeah, I see your point. Okay, I don't know if Scott or Dan Matz wants to comment.
The only comment I would make is I think, Jay, you're right here that this is largely looking at the sort of upside here. I will say that one of the groups that we do not have time to go in with today, that we will review at our next meeting, which was the sort of specific harms and risks group that really did take a little bit of a broad look at a lot of those things, including some talk about healthcare as well. So there may be a little bit of that living, and this is sort of the nature of a lot of the the artificial walls that we may have put up here between these different groups. A lot of these are really different sides of the same coin. So
yeah, and there might be an opportunity to reflect in 3 back to that other work group's activities that would allow that to be fully wrapped up. The question, ultimately is whether the recommendation should be more upfront about the safety aspect of it. Okay, Molly?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think the word safely is doing a lot of work, right, in 3. And so trying to figure out like what's the right way to really clarify some of the things that we did see come up so clearly in the healthcare conversation about risk.
Yeah. Okay. Other points? I think hearing none, perhaps we should move on to education, and Ryan can take us forward.
Excellent. So a few framing comments and then summarize the recommendations that we have. So our work in the education subcommittee really builds directly on the foundation of the full committee meeting we had back on May 9th on education and AI. That session really helped us frame up the scope and identify opportunities and really set the stage for a lot of the recommendations that we have. We think, certainly the most encouraging things that we found is that we don't need to go elsewhere to look for models that are working. We saw that clearly. This is not an example of we need a New Jersey example, or this is something really cool they're doing in Idaho. We have those fabulous use cases right here in Maine schools today. We saw them in some of our rural K-12 districts, and we see them in higher education, both public, but also our private partners are doing exceptional work as well. I think we're really showing what's possible when educators really can embrace AI, and is noted in today's, in our conversations and in the chat. Sharing those use cases, is really the key to increasing acceptance in education. The challenge before us is really scaling these successes across the state so that every student and educator can benefit, and it's not just pockets of excellence. We think a lot of those structures for sharing are already in place. And we think our recommendations will build on those existing supports versus kind of creating a whole new set of requirements. These recommendations really reflect several great discussions. They cover empowering educators and reaching every teacher with professional development, preparing new teachers, embedding AI literacy for our students, and trialing these promising AI tools. I'm excited to share our group. So let me jump into the six. So number one, Maine already has early educators leading the way with creative use cases. We want to lift up their work. We want to give them access to new tools. We want to create ways for others to learn from those successes. So showcasing, scaling what we're doing already, we think we can inspire and equip more teachers to really join this work. Two, we need professional development so that every teacher and administrator has access to AI guidance and toolkits and examples. Again, not just the great pockets of innovation and excellence that we have out there. This will ensure that no matter where an educator works, they have the resources and confidence to integrate AI into their teaching. Again, an excellent opportunity to not only build out the great work that's already occurring at Maine DOE, but we also know we can build on the great work that's occurring in our higher eds and our nonprofits across the state. Three, we think that AI should be part of teacher preparation programs so that new educators enter the workforce ready to use these tools responsibly and teach about them effectively. So embedding AI training early will create that consistency across programs and set a baseline for new teachers entering the classroom. Four, again, we heard this theme, but just like internet safety before became a core skill, we want students today to have a foundation of AI, how it works, how to use it responsibly, how to think critically about those AI outputs. Five, we want to pilot promising AI tools. And so we want to test the most effective AI-backed tools that are out there, both for our students and our educators, especially where they can close gaps for rural schools, students with learning challenges and English learners. And these pilots give us real evidence of things that work, and we're excited to potentially build on those. And then finally, AI is in education. AI everywhere is moving incredibly fast. And we need to monitor state and federal policy. We need to collect examples from Maine schools, keep educators and family informed as this landscape changes. That way we can stay ahead of the curve and continue to make thoughtful, informed decisions rather than reacting late. So that is hopefully a good summary of the work that our committee did. Certainly invite any of my subcommittee members to fill in any gaps if I missed anything, but happy to throw that out there and answer any questions.
Okay, so similar questions to what we've seen before, and they're on the screen. So thoughts, questions, gaps? Excellent summary, Ryan.
I'll just say sort of a comment on the side. I'm thrilled that there's not any of this, let's make sure that we're not, screwing up our child's education by turning them on to AI and all of the, the fear kind of stuff, because that's out there. And I just don't think it's got a place. Hopefully we've learned those lessons from the past, but I'm very glad to not see that.
I think the literacy aspect is so vital in all this. It's really getting people to fully understand how it can benefit in the classroom. And really, I think it's such an important part about that, Dan. And it's good to see it spelled out clearly here. Other questions or points?
I'll just say during the pause, we really had lots of good conversations about, again, what's reflected in the chat and what we've talked about is, there are really exceptional use cases out there. And that's what people need. They need to know the value. They need to know the possibility of what's out there. And education, I think, is just such a great space to do that. And so we had some really excellent conversations on that space.
I just want to add to Ryan's comment that I think that's true. And while in healthcare, we really had very strong language about being a leader, I think we're already leading in many ways in Maine. And so the idea that we're going to continue innovating maybe is too soft of a language, really. It's to really remain at the forefront, or really, push further, because you guys are really doing so much already. That's really admirable, and really trend setting. So we might want to think about some parallelism to the healthcare comments. I think it was Nicole first, and then Justin.
Thank you. And I might have missed it, but I was thinking it could make sense to more directly, or just, I think a lot about like adult ed. And I think this came up in the education meeting, that maybe we're worried a little bit less about young people and the guidance they receive in our schools than we are about continuing education for adults. So like adult ed and library as partners in this effort, and making sure they're networked in with the best practices that are happening like in the university systems and things.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Like, we're focused on grad schools and new teachers and every educator, and AI pioneering educators, but educating the more general public is maybe a gap. Justin?
Yeah, thanks. Ryan, I found that summary fascinating. I think that point two is something I wanted to speak to for a second. The professional development need is something I've been working on a little bit with some of the schools that we work with, and doing a series of workshops and trainings for districts across the state for the last few years. And like it's evident to me from like South Portland to SAD4 up in Piscataquis County. It's like folks are using AI, and there's always like a group of educators, or bus drivers, admin, who are integrating it into everything from like redesigning bus routes to drafting IEPs quicker. Like, and some of those uses are alarming as an attorney, right? I see that and I'm like, oh, that's terrifying. But like invariably at these workshops, I see that like that sort of I think the phrase is like, the future is here, it's just unevenly distributed, or unevenly appropriated. And that concept of like, there's like 4 or 5 people in every school district who are just like savants. They're like able to like see this technology and apply it in almost any context. And I'm curious what sort of like, how, or if at all you discuss this, but like how we could leverage those people who already exist within every district to like know the needs of that district to help the PD or education of their colleagues. Cause like, I don't know that it's always an outside in thing. I think it's an inside, development thing. And I'm curious if you think there's like a way to leverage that.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. We certainly had lots of conversations about that. I'll certainly invite any of the K-12 folks to jump in if they want to mention it. I'll just mention, in the higher ed side, and I'll just speak for the university system. Scale, the training, all of these are a challenge. But the great thing about the pandemic is that everyone has Zoom now, and so at the system we've set up these real-time trainings where, hang out, and we'll talk about Gemini today and Outlook next week. And the nice thing is that you can do them by Zoom. And we send out some invites, and we'll get 300 people that will show up. And we'll do it a couple of weeks later, and we'll get another 400 people. And so I do think there's opportunities to take advantage of technology and scale, showing, it doesn't need to be anything elaborate. As we've said numerous times, it's showing the possibilities, and here's how one teacher is using it, and here's how somebody else, and looking for the synergies between them.
Great. Sarah?
Thanks, Mary. Thanks all. This is a great presentation. I think similar to the conversation we were having earlier around themes across the different working groups, I was noting number 6 here in terms of monitoring the federal policy landscape, and thinking that this is another one that might cross across the different sectors and that we might want to think about combining in some way. So I just wanted to mention that.
Great point. Pender?
Yet, Justin, to your point of there being some rock stars in every school, and how do we leverage that expertise and passion to really bring everybody else along? Beth and her team at the digital learning team at our department have had that has been the focus and the design of all of their professional learning, because we know that teachers are more eager to learn from other teachers who are in the field and experiencing the exact same conditions. And so that is exactly what we do, is train the trainers, train the educators to pull their team members along and to really empower these champions of innovation and risk taking. So I know that you can connect with Beth and her team for ideas on how to structure that in other ways, because her team know those people who are the champions out there.
Great. Ruth?
Thanks so much. Yeah, I just wanted to also respond to what Justin had asked, and also kind of build momentum of what Pender had put out there, in that both through the Department of Education's work as well as through Maine Math and Science's work and the university's work, a lot of us are working already within those existing structures of the school districts. Like, so for example, our STEM Workforce Ready project has over 16 hub districts all across the state, and we've trained those educators. They're kind of, the savants and the ones that are the early adopters, and now they're training others within the district, and now those districts are now training their neighboring districts. So it's beginning to spread in that way of getting those best case scenarios and best practices out in a number of different ways, and spreading and utilizing that exact hope that you had put out there, Justin. So it's happening, and I think it's exciting to capture it in other ways across many different organizations.
That's a good point. Sam?
Yeah, I wanted to ask the subgroup that worked on this if you had talked about evaluation, both in the context of evaluation for students and whether there's a way to simplify that to reduce burdens on teachers to teach to the test, which I know is a big concern for a lot of them with all the standardized testing that they have. And also in terms of evaluation for the teachers themselves, I know that there's often concern about surveillance, about new tools being used to evaluate how teachers are performing in the classroom. So I'd be curious how that is reflected in these recommendations.
Maybe I could volunteer if I think Beth is still on. We talked about this extensively. We talked about it in higher ed, K to 12, everywhere. It's all about assessment. I know Beth led a lot of that conversation, so I'll invite her or the commissioner to jump in.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that we definitely discussed this, as Ryan had said. I think that when we're looking, I think as I look at these recommendations and how it got delivered, we see that sort of in this idea around number 6 as we sort of watch as these things are rolled out, because I think at this point, these are not being used widespread in our school. And so those kind of tools that you're talking about for evaluating teachers or in the classrooms, I think that's the piece that we have to be really diligent on going forward, around staying on top of what is happening, both in our schools, but federally and nationally, internationally, as these tools are being created and used, encouraged to be used in our schools, maybe from outside vendors, and being able to provide that ongoing guidance that at this time is not something that we are seeing as pushing in that use. We absolutely talked about, and this falls under the professional development, is helping our educators and our administrators really understand what these tools, as they continue to grow, evolve, and become available to them, what they actually do and what are the both advantages and possibilities, but also looking at questions and risks and how you go about that, really eyes wide open and asking the questions and being really transparent about that with all people involved. So I think as I look at where it came down to, it whenever you read these, it never captures all of the conversation that was had, and certainly something that we went around with, but I think that's where we see it reflected in here. In 5 and 6 to sort of be that part. But
Chris, do you want to touch on that or something else?
Different topic. So if you want to stay on this one, I can wait.
Anybody else want to touch on? I think, okay.
Mary, can I ask one question about the tools?
Sure.
I know a lot of schools use like Power School or Magic School. Did the group vet those tools in specific, or was it a little bit broader?
I defer to Ryan and his colleagues.
Yeah, we definitely stayed at a higher level. I think there are different tools depending whether you're in higher ed or K-12 or where you are in the system, and so we tended to stay out of that space, although we talked about it at a slightly higher level.
Okay. Back to Chris.
Yeah, thanks. I think it was Molly, I'm not sure, but I think it was Molly who was talking about sort of adult ed and continuing education earlier, and that got me thinking about these recommendations and framing, wondering if we might want to explicitly call out a role for post-secondary or lifelong education and some outcomes therein, especially with AI rapidly evolving and changing. We've always talked about how important lifelong learning is, but it's never been more true that it's going to be essential to train and retrain throughout one's lifetime. So I wondered if we wanted to consider building in something along those lines, and in that, calling out some recommendations specific to post-secondary education. I mean, the state invests a massive amount of resource in, universities and systems of all sorts throughout the state, training programs. And so there just might be something that we could do there with respect to the learners, as well as the sort of educators and some of the other input-oriented recommendations we might focus on. The other observation I had was whether or not we also wanted to consider, in the context of education, the role of industry and employers. Akin to lifelong learning, the easier we can make it for an adult learner in Maine of any sort, one that has tons of post high school credentials and one that does not, to do that learning on the job and to use AI technologies as a way to make that frictionless and easier to achieve. That might put us in a unique position as a state that makes it easier for every Mainer to continuously be learning because it's integrated in the world of work. So those are two particular sort of platforms, if you will, post-secondary ed or sort of the lifelong learning platforms of various sorts, and the role of industry and employers in the education context that I wondered if we might want to consider in future discussions.
Ryan, do you want to reflect on those at all, or maybe folks from your committee?
I really like the lifelong learning comment. I liked it when it came up before in the adult ed context, and I like the way Chris referenced it too. Even in the trainings that I'm doing with faculty, I find that folks, even if they see the potential, some people get intimidated because the tools just change so fast. And so that point about you constantly needing to be, the refreshment skills, I think is a really important one.
Great.
Mary, I wonder if I can sort of ask Chris and Ryan a question. When we think, so first of all, I'll triple down on the lifelong learning aspect, mostly because of the pace of change and that it's always needed and different. And when I think about that, I think about it in two channels. And my question, I think the answer is that we need to do both, but if there's a priority. One is just sort of the general knowledge needed to enable AI, to overcome fears around AI, and to begin to build AI into your work life or into your general life. And then secondly, within each of our industry sectors, there are going to be more specific applications that we need to build into our programs, that we need to build into our curricula, and that we need to work with our industry partners to make sure that we're helping support their workforce. And the question is, do you see one of those as a priority, or both of them as an equal priority, or how would we approach the subject of sort of industry specific, the use of industry specific AI versus those general characteristics of using AI in the workplace?
I'll jump in first and then let Chris. I think it's probably both, as you said. For me, it probably leans a little more on the first one, though. One of the things that we're certainly doing here at the university system is we've kind of pivoted to providing, this idea that we're going to provide a foundational knowledge of AI to all of our employees, not just those pockets of excellence. Imagine what our researchers could do if they had this tool and so on. And so instead, we've taken the philosophy that we're gonna train all of our employees. We're gonna deploy 20 plus of these AI tools and make them available to anyone across the system that wants them. But it's useless if it doesn't come with some foundational knowledge of AI. And so once you give that general foundational knowledge, then it's super easy to jump into the customized higher ed tool or the customized AI finance tool or whatever it is. But if you don't have that foundational knowledge, you're really, really going to struggle. My 2 cents anyway. Chris?
I think part of the power and the recommendations we're looking at right now is that it begins to sort of establish an ecosystem that will address the first observation or part of your question, Dave, around sort of foundational knowledge, right? With every year that goes by, as we implement some of the recommendations on the screen, young people especially will be sort of graduating as leaders in super empowered AI, foundation skills right from the get-go. So I think the key to reaching people is to eliminate the friction of accessing education. So I think if I had to choose one or the other, I'd say leading with the employers, because that brings you the use context. It reaches every type of person where they are, and presumably they have some foundational technological knowledge to do the jobs they have, and they have a context to imagine sort of the aspiration and the evolution of their education. So I think challenging, and why I was suggesting we might want to have a specific call to action for industry or recommendation around industry is, I think the education is more powerful if it doesn't happen separate from the job. If it happens integrated within the world of work, it makes it immediately applicable, which is how learning takes hold anyway, as we all know. Sort of the practice and synthesis is what makes it really sort of stick and motivating. So I think that's why I think it's so key to get employers involved in this. I think education systems and providers like, your system, Dave, or the Maine system, or ours at Northeastern, or any, have a role to play in providing the expertise and the content, but it's way more powerful, as if we can do it in partnership with industry.
Yeah, so the industry comment, Chris, is super interesting, but maybe that might fall into the purview of the workforce group and that type of continuing support of employees and so forth. So we can discuss that when we get to that area and see if it fits there. It's great.
Well, I agree, Mary, and I think it was Molly. I shouldn't maybe say industry, and rather I should say partners, right? Your local library can be a partner in the lifelong learning endeavor. There's lots of partners, not just employers. So maybe I'll modify my comment slightly, given what you just said, to broaden the scope a little bit more around contextual partners to deploy the learning for a lifetime.
Yeah, that's a good reflection. I like that. Okay. Any other comments, questions, topics of discussion for the education group? We are a little early, but I think it might be a good time to take a break now until 1:05. So feel free to turn off your cameras and step away for 5 minutes and kind of regroup yourselves. And we'll be back at 1:05 and Dave will take you through the rest of the meeting.
Mary, shall we give the group another minute or so to reassemble?
Sounds good. I think whenever you see the screens light up,
Yeah.
good to go.
Okay, Dan, I think we've got, I'm going to guess we've got most people back. We might have a few people off camera while they're having a little lunch or something. First of all, I want to thank Mary for leading us through the first half of that discussion. It was fascinating. And one of my takeaways is one of the sort of problems we have in terms of crafting recommendations or even thinking about AI is that it has very soft edges. Is it workforce? Is it education? And I think we're going to see some of that come through in our next conversation. So I'm going to turn right over to Chris Mallett, who led the workforce group, and ask you for a brief overview of the work that your group did, the recommendations that you've come out with. And then as we've been doing, we'll go into about a 25-minute discussion about those recommendations. And again, hopefully focus on the risks, the opportunities, the issues, and the gaps. But generally discuss the place of AI in the workforce and how we might be offering recommendations consistent with the governor's executive order. So Chris, take us away.
Thanks, Dave. Our group met several times over the summer, and we used as our process really the framing questions that had been suggested and just unpacked them kind of one piece at a time, tried to generate as many ideas as we could around that. We had really great representation, Commissioner Fortman and others from the Department of Labor, President Dagler and others from the community college system, Sam representing labor and sort of apprenticeship education and training programs. Warren brought a really nice perspective around investment and sort of broader industry trends and opportunities, and others participated in the discussion. I also particularly want to thank Dan and Scott for helping land the plane, because I, as a facilitator, misunderstood the delivery deadlines. So some of these fine recommendations were synthesized in a really nice way by our colleagues from GoPIF. We tried to model our own practice by using AI. Warren's suggestion to synthesize some of the transcripts from our own discussions to make sure we're reflecting and capturing some of what we had actually talked about. And I think that is reflected here on the left side of the screen. So I'll just highlight a couple of these as you take a look at the slide. Our group was really intrigued about using various channels that already exist within the state to evaluate what's happening as AI unfolds in real time throughout the workforce. And the commissioner educated us around the notion of the state's workforce board and various advisory boards, as well as some of the employment centers and other methods that are really in some ways on the front line of what's happening in the workforce, and could be themselves sources of information as we understand and evaluate, how AI is actually influencing the workforce as it all kind of moves along, and labor markets. You'll see that first recommendation to evaluate that built upon a little bit later down below as well. We discussed this already, but we've talked a lot about the notion about expanding training opportunities to prepare all Maine workers, and then also jumping down to I don't know if I see it here. Oh, number 5, engaging those workers as well, making sure that we are listening to the workers themselves, sort of, and the citizens, if you want to broaden it beyond just employment, to understand what they're seeing and shaping and experiencing with respect to how AI is affecting workforce opportunities in the state. So evaluating in real time, involving the workers, expanding training opportunities along the lines of what we just discussed in the education group. The third one was really interesting, being ready to rapidly deploy and respond to potentially the negative impacts of AI. For example, if it begins to take hold in such a way that does yield job transition or unemployment impact, being able to quickly reinvest and retool and retrain to be supportive, and then also proactively thinking about what we need to do in anticipation that that may happen in certain industries and in certain fields, using some of the expertise and data that we might gain from the recommendation in number 1 to anticipate negative impacts and be proactive about retooling and reskilling to, if not avoid, prepare for some of the impacts that may come if certain types of work become less available as a result of AI expansion. The fourth recommendation here is to be bold about leveraging tools to expand the reach. And we talked a lot about setting up a concept of experimentation, pilot, and demonstration sites within the state's existing systems. For example, in one conversation, we brainstormed around what we might do with the workforce employment centers, perhaps in partnership with industry, to set up experiments. And if we aren't able to go that far, or if that isn't sort of necessarily what we want to recommend, we talked in the same conversation about some of the realities of what it takes to simply be able to implement change within the state system, from a procurement, from a compliance and a regulatory perspective, and some of the not obstacles but realities of actually implementing recommendation number 4. So maybe there's a way to think creatively about innovating the procurement system, for example, or tasking various directors and divisions within state government to have an experimentation plan for AI, to leverage AI tools as they evolve. And then then the final one, again, just coming back to training and education, in the ways that we've talked about it in both of the subgroups this morning, or this afternoon, I suppose. Making sure that all Mainers and students and trainees have access to the state-of-the-art tools and are able to contextualize them and use them to take advantage, so that our workforce can remain competitive. I think that captures it, but I would invite any of the other members of our subgroup to let me know if I've overlooked something, or if these specific recommendations don't quite reflect some of your key takeaways. Thanks.
So let's go to Chris's first question. If the members of the subgroup feel as though that's a complete capturing, we can move into the discussion and identify the risks, the opportunities, the issues, and the gaps associated with these that fill the borders of these recommendations.
Yeah, I'd just say, Chris, I think you did an amazing job leading our group. The one, area number 3, readying Maine, readying investment to come to the aid of folks that are left behind here. This feels like a really important public policy question to me. I'm of the view that AI is going to displace lots of people and fairly quickly. And I think public policy is going to have to do a better job with that displacement than public policy did generally with the displacement around offshoring. And so that's not particular to Maine, but I think it's really important that we think about what the state can do on number 3, because what I'm seeing is this wave could crash on us much more quickly than I think some of us expect.
Okay. So that clearly highlights a risk that might be framed in the report. Other thoughts?
I would echo Warren and his comments about Chris's leadership for our group. I thought he did a great job with facilitation. Also, certainly have concerns about displacement and concerns about job quality that I think are reflected in that point 5 here about engaging workers. I think that's important enough for all of the different groups that we've talked about. That gets to the point I made about the healthcare subgroup. I think it's very relevant to the education subgroup. I would like to see us think about what that actually looks like in practice and provide some really concrete recommendations, because it can feel kind of nebulous to just say we want to engage with workers, and employers can reach out to workers. I think that's the language in that subpoint, that employers can reach out to workers to get their feedback. But I think we need to be quite strong on this to make sure that we have the systems in place so that we're getting that feedback in real time, and really taking it and using it to inform public policy.
So Sam, am I hearing, and I think we've had conversations, I'm not sure with this group, but about in terms of what the report might look like, but there might be some call outs that would be sort of AI in action or real life examples or things that take the recommendations and find ways in which we can pack in examples so that people can tangibly understand that. Is that the kind of thing you're talking about?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's just, really thinking about, maybe it's providing some examples, but really thinking about the actual structures that we have in place to provide workers with the opportunity to provide feedback about the way that AI is impacting their daily lives, whether that's in terms of evaluation or in terms of surveillance, so that our policymakers can adapt and make policy that's going to protect them and make sure that they're in a good position.
Got it. Okay.
And Dave, I can't figure out how to find my hand on this one here.
All right,
So
I've
I'm
got
just
you.
Okay, sorry about that. I want to echo, the thanks to Chris for leading this group. We had many kind of wide-ranging and interesting conversations, and being able to pull all of it together and keep us all on track was a major accomplishment. So I appreciate the leadership there. I do want to, and I support everything Sam just said about how do we involve workers? How do we make sure that their voices are front and center and listened to? And also about the potential dangers. And I'm not sure if that's going to spill over into one of the other groups that we haven't gotten to yet, about what are the benefits and potential hazards. And maybe that'll get fleshed out a little bit more there. On the comment that Warren made about number 3, reemployment policies and investment strategies, and the concern about responding in a more robust way than we were able to do during the offshoring. I want to flag that much of that response before was tied to federal resources. And so as we're thinking about how do we advocate for this and how do we think about opportunities, there's also that federal strategy that we would need to look at. In any sort of major workforce disaster, there's usually some sort of federal funding. So having this conversation on the state level is incredibly important and probably not going to be sufficient. So I'd want us to build in something about our federal partners.
And can you draw out what something might look like? Ongoing conversations with the delegation, Department of Labor to Department of Labor type interactions, or what those things might look like a little?
Yeah, so Dave, there would normally be like a national emergency grant, or a like trade assistance grant. The trade program has not been reauthorized. I don't want to get us down into those specifics, and maybe you and I can talk on offline, but I'm just saying that there's probably also, as we're thinking about, does there need to be something available for workers? Having that conversation that it's at a state level, but also there may be a need for federal resources as well.
Okay. All right. Helpful thought. Thank you, Laura. Others? Not everybody at once. And do feel free to speak up. I'm not I'm sort of scrolling through because I've got the screen share on, so. And there is quite a bit here, and there's a natural linkage here between education and workforce. I go back to the conversation in my head that we were just having on the education side and enabling that. And Chris, I think it was your recommendation, and I do agree that we're enabling that sort of lifelong, ongoing educational process and trying to manage that through our business partnerships and through those relationships, because that's where it's tangible. And that's where, that's where I think we're going to get match up the need of the individual with the need of the business most readily. But any thoughts, any gaps in those areas that we might want to make sure that we've got covered?
President Daigle, I think we got hands from Justin and then Julia.
Thank you. Justin, let's have Justin go first.
Yeah, I think that this certainly does overlap a lot with the education subgroup, but the thing that jumps to mind for me, looking at all these, is sort of like where the decision, the first decision to use AI technology to enter into a contract for technology arises, and like how workplaces navigate that seems to dictate, a lot of these other items, right? Like the real-time impacts, how prepared folks are, how much they've invested in this, what their policies around this are. So like one of the things that I do in my practice is like I work with workplaces, with employers or a group of employees who are trying to make a decision of whether or not to enter into a contract, to help them understand the implications of that contract. And oftentimes, like, there's like basic things like, don't enter into a long contract right now because the technology is shifting so quickly. It's not a good time to enter into a 2-year contract. And then there's like pretty complicated things like that weren't intuitive to me, but like symmetry be like between the AI software's data retention policy and like some insurance record keeping obligation, or the Maine State Archive Acts, or like whether or not it's a public record, like whether you're subject to disclosures of transcripts and of chat transcripts. And so like, I guess when I'm like looking at all of this, I'm wondering where that set of somewhat basic to pretty complicated considerations fits into it.
I think that's an excellent question, and something that we should sort of make sure that we carry forward in our notes and make sure that we're covering that, because it's a complex area. The interweave is a very complex sort of matter that we'll have to get to in the drafting. Julia.
Thank you. I think now that as I've been thinking it over, maybe it's covered by number 5 of engaging workers to ensure AI improves careers and expands opportunities for all. I was just thinking that we don't often speak about the opportunities that AI from an equity perspective maybe brings to the workforce, and tapping into even more of the untapped labor force that exists. So, I'm thinking, a translation mechanism, for example, can allow workers to grow in their careers, but also enter careers that without AI, we haven't been able to really tap into that workforce to the degree and the scale that is required. So maybe it is in number 5, but I just wanted to flag it as not only a sort of from a AI as a potential risk for job loss, but also an opportunity to increase our actual labor force.
And expand the number of people who can engage.
You can participate.
Yeah, participate, exactly. Yeah, interesting counter perspective to the job loss piece is how can we use this as a tool to make sure that we can engage that portion of Maine's workforce that right now is being left out of career opportunities. Interesting thought. Okay. Okay. Others. I think potentially, Chris, that it speaks to the quality of your work when we have a half a dozen recommendations on a matter that's as complex as this, and no one in this group seems to be able to say, "Hey, we missed something here." But let's just take another look and make sure that we have these recommendations. First of all, are in alignment with the governor's executive order. And I think they're at the right level. So are there any gaps? Are there any places that we've missed? Okay, not
You
seeing.
got David,
Jay.
seeing one hand from Jay, and then otherwise,
Yeah.
looks like we may be ready.
And that's really, I'm just making a confirmation statement here. This is really a great lesson in being succinct yet covering everything. I'm not seeing anything here, so I'm just I'm reiterating what I guess everybody's saying by not saying anything. And that's it. Thanks.
Okay, excellent. Scott, did you see somebody? I didn't see another hand besides Jay's. Did you?
I saw Jay's lovely 5 fingers.
Yeah.
I think
Okay.
Andrew's got a chat comment.
Yeah.
Andrew?
Hi, folks. Yeah, my question in the chat here is just if and it's probably both relevant to this subgroup as well as education, just as to if does the recommendations taking shape into specific priorities or sets of activities, should there be a funding plan that takes shape with the administration's AI action plan?
So let me ask, would you coordinate that with what were some of Laura's comments around making sure that we're engaging with federal resources?
I think they're pretty complementary. I think more just along the lines of funding readiness, I guess, would be the category of my question.
I actually, Andrew, that's a really good one, because I mean, imagine the wave that I fear hits us, faster than we think. For state government to be able to be nimble, it's going to have to be in a position to spend money fairly quickly. And I think that's a really interesting question. Is there a rainy day fund or a whatever the right word is to begin addressing things if this thing starts hitting Mainers faster than we thought?
Some sort of a contingency pool that allows us to react.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think to both of those points, just having a body, I don't know if this is what I was, maybe this is what I was thinking when I talked about really formalizing a place for worker feedback, but having a body that is really, or maybe a specific part of the Department of Labor, I guess, that is really focused on monitoring these changes and responding and engaging with workers. I mean, maybe that's part of what's required, to Andrew's point. I mean, maybe we really need to be thinking about scaling something up that's really focused specifically on AI as it impacts everything in the workforce.
So we've got another minute or two here. Let me ask Laura, if you listen to the sets of comments here around being able to be responsive to the changing needs, et cetera. Do you feel like within labor right now we have the right data sets to be able to quickly identify those risks and then be able to react to them?
So do we have the basic information or systems? I would say yes. Do we have the resources to respond if Warren is accurate? Do we have the resources to respond quickly, nimbly? No, which is why I was saying there need to be additional yeah, I mean, but do we have the kind of a skeleton of an infrastructure? Yes, we do.
My question was, I understand the resources and the need to be able to sort of coordinate with federal opportunities, but the data in the employment sector that causes state policymakers or the Department of Labor or the governor's office to be able to say, we see an evolving trend here, we need to be able to respond to this. And to see that trend, you need some kind of a data set to help support you.
Well, I mean, I think that we have the best data that's out there. I think the challenge is, and Warren, you may want to disagree or jump in here. I think we have really good data to identify trends. Do we have data that if it happens in a 3-week turnaround time, are we going to be able to identify it that quickly? Probably not. I think that we can, and I know Mark's on here, he may want to jump in, but I think we have good data. I think that real-time data is an ever-evolving thing, and I'd be very open to hearing if there's what the best data is that's out there in addition to what we currently have. So I think I walked around a circle there, Dave, but I think we have good data. Is there, if somebody knows of better data that we should be looking at, we would be very open to.
Yeah, but I think in the way you answered the question, you don't see a risk that we don't have the right data or the right information framework to be able to identify issues. It can always be better, but you're not identifying a gap or a risk that leaves us vulnerable. Okay.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Before we move over to our friends in the public sector, I'll just ask one more time if there are any other comments or thoughts that you want to add to the workforce panel conversation. Okay. Thank you. And Chris, thank you for a job well done. So that will cause us to turn the same framework of this conversation over to our colleague, Nick Marquis. And Nick, you can walk us through your recommendations and sort of the build out of your subcommittee's work.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate everybody that joined the subcommittee with me to kind of dig into all this. We met several times over the past few months, really rich, wide-ranging set of conversations, focusing on exploring how AI can responsibly and effectively support the public sector, both at the state and municipal levels. We kind of focused our conversations around 3 scopes: the what, the how, and then municipalities. So what are the promising potential use cases of AI in public service delivery? The how is what groundwork needs to be in place before we adopt these cases safely and effectively. And then municipalities focusing around what's unique about implementing AI at the local level and how the state can support that. Recommendation number 1, to build a strong, cohesive statewide approach to AI governance. AI is going to have an impact on on all agencies in state government. We're looking for, or the recommendation would be that agencies develop a perspective on utilizing AI internally, and then focus on how that can improve service delivery. And then, leaning into an interagency type leadership council where, AI governance, learning, public engagement can be shared. Investing in a comprehensive state capacity for AI adoption and governance. Again, the common thread across we've heard from all is training. So investing in AI training for state employees and extend it to municipalities. Strengthening technical capacity across the state for AI evaluation, design, and deployment, and building centralized policy coordination with AI strategy, that supports the broader policies, broader priorities. We want to enhance public transparency on how AI tools are deployed. We talked about doing that by publishing information on AI tools used across government, what their purpose is, what safeguards are in place. Potentially creating a public dashboard or registry to track AI tool status and outcomes, and then having regular reporting to build public trust and accountability. Supporting municipalities was a big part of the conversation. Providing technical assistance, potentially planning work, potentially grants, and implementation resources for municipalities. Having the state leverage its ability to assist municipalities with needs assessments, and helping to drive AI projects, and also to incentivize interlocal projects, demonstrating that ability to regionally cooperate together and drive a broader result. Collaborate with Maine's higher education institutions to launch a Maine AI Innovation Hub. We talked about this, there were themes about this, right? Leveraging universities and other education forums to help support local government in AI projects. Matching students with faculty with real world needs in government. And strengthening the public sector talent pipeline through exposure to public service careers, and enabling innovative procurement strategies to solicit AI solutions for critical challenges, making sure that procurement practices are kept up to date with the rapidly evolving technology changes with AI. Understanding and considering innovative or lower cost AI solutions, and monitor and update technology procurement policies to improve outcomes for the residents of Maine and the folks that interface with government. The recommendations really reflect a desire to balance the innovation with the need to service the constituents and the residents of Maine, focusing on supporting learning and making sure that any AI we implement has a real positive impact on service delivery. And that's all of it.
Okay. Quite excellent. So, thoughts, any questions we might have around the recommendations? Are they clear? We understand them. And then are there any gaps? Are there any risks? Are there any places where we might be sort of nudging ourselves in the wrong direction, or any places where we really need to call more out here? Who wants to go first?
I will say if Jay or Andrew or Dan or any of the other members of the team want to jump into, please feel free.
Chris Mallett.
I just wanted to highlight, I just love number 5. And I think it could lend itself to kind of like an open source approach, right? And faculty and educators, or even citizens from far and wide, could be given the tools and templates to kind of develop their own education tools that could then be made freely available, and kind of in the spirit of social media and crowdsourcing, the most effective might sort of elevate to the top and be utilized or really featured. I think that could be really, really powerful. The other observation I had is that maybe 1, 3, and 4 could blend together to create something similar around tools for governance and tools for implementation, specifically for the realities of public life, government realities. So taking this sort of clearinghouse or hub opportunity and in the case of higher ed, expecting higher ed to participate, but in the case of everyone else, inviting them to participate to create something that could really be an accelerant and also maybe get at some of the other themes from the last discussion around getting the voice of workers and citizens and real-time feedback loops built in. If we built that in such a way, it could be a really, really powerful tool.
So, Chris, with number 5, are you advocating for something that might look like a little bit of an incubation center where people could come in, have resources, and then have a network where they can exchange and begin to really sort of accelerate both learning and use?
Oh, that's really interesting. I hadn't thought about place-based. I was thinking more akin to like edX or the sort of open course movements around like a la Coursera or something, or LinkedIn Learning, that could be a virtual resource or a virtual hub. But yeah, you could also do it. You could have walk-in service centers and build some education in along those lines too, Dave. That's a great idea.
Ryan, I noticed that you wanted to sort of chime in on that, and then we'll go to Jay.
Yeah, I think Chris summed it up really, really well. I was just going to say the same. I really like number 5. Our system has had an AI task force, and we've been on a parallel track to this one, and we're finalizing our recommendations for our trustees in a couple of weeks. And our number 2 recommendation is the establishment of a UMS AI Innovation Resource Hub. So we think there's huge value in it, and I love all the things that Chris and Dave suggested about potentials for that. So just want to put in a big +1 for that.
Excellent. Other thoughts? Andrew?
Yeah, thanks. Jay probably will be able to double click on this one, but I just, given some of the conversation in the education subgroup and workforce, I would just highlight the commonality, I think, with what was discussed and heard from municipal representation with item 4. And just the very common set of needs, set of opportunities, and resourcing that is needed. And we had got some good input from Maine Municipal Association that I think really galvanized some of our discussion, and I feel like Jay helped reinforce through much of our conversation. So I think one of the great things I think at this stage of this assessment will be to continue to crosswalk where there are commonality between recommendations in each subgroup, and I would just sort of double click on number 4 for those purposes. So I'll leave. I have another comment, but on a different front. So I will yield my time to the to Representative Grahowski here. Sorry, Senator Grahowski, pardon me.
Senator, that sounds like your entree.
Apparently. Thank you, Andrew. One thing I was thinking about that I saw in the section about state government that I didn't really see reflected in the municipal section was the importance of help with cybersecurity. Serving on the Energy and Utilities Committee, I'm like particularly worried that we have a lot of very small utilities that are locally operated, which is great, but do they have access to the kind of support that they need to maintain cybersecurity, essentially, where they have really important assets that they're managing, but they're not tapped into some multinational corporation that's doing this work, across states and countries. So I kind of just wanted to flag that. I think that's in there regarding the state, but I think it'd be important to really illuminate that regarding local, municipal and utility support.
That interesting, absolutely appropriate comment. I know in some of the work that we're doing, we're trying to make sure that, for example, data is both secure and that the data used in AI is large enough to make sure that it's not innately sort of biased in a particular direction. But the security element is paramount. I will wonder aloud and just ask for your reaction as to whether there's also an opportunity to weave in that resource center that Ryan and Chris have talked about as a vehicle for municipalities and other state groups to also be able to benefit from.
I would say I think so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I think that not just what you said, David, but also the opportunity for associations that support the public sector would play it's an opportunity for them to show their value in having membership with them is to help coordinate some of these efforts.
Mm-hmm. I hear that theme. Okay. Excellent. Andrew?
Thanks. Recognizing we're probably towards the end of our collective time here, this builds upon some of the discussion in this subgroup, but is a timely update for folks, of which many of you are going to be getting an email from me anyway. Just an important update. Yesterday, the Connectivity Authority submitted our final proposal for the $272 million of broadband infrastructure funding. It's round 3 of doing it. But there's some important and relevant impacts here. First and foremost, it's an important milestone that all locations in the state will have access to high-speed internet, and that builds upon the last 3 years of work with over 250 million deployed, connecting about 90,000 locations. So the unserved problem will be a aspect of the digital divide that will have been bridged. Obviously, it takes time to get the things built fully, and we're in motion on it. What's most important and relevant for this group is because we've been chipping away at the problem has been smaller, meaning our competitive funding round yielded about 48 million in awards. What this effectively means is that 200 million or so remains a part of our award. We, like all other states, are awaiting guidance from the federal government regarding how that will take shape. Nationally, it is a pool of funds that is available of around 20 billion. In Maine, it will be about 200 million. It is highly anticipated that the eligible uses for those remaining funds will revolve around cybersecurity, infrastructure hardening, workforce upskilling, and all aspects of the AI economy and implementation of the AI action plan. Nationally, there is not clarity as to how these non-deployment funds will be used. And who knows if they will actually be really preserved. However, I think given the conversation here and given some of the recommendations even within the public sector subgroup, seem like a timely update to share with folks.
Okay, appreciate that. Any questions for Andrew or any questions sort of back on the topic of the public sector and their 6 recommendations?
I did want to follow up on Andrew's comment. First off, congratulations. That's really exciting for the whole state, to just hear about that expansion of infrastructure. We've had this conversation before. I know, there was some back and forth about the environmental implications of AI in some of our big group discussions, but and I'm not really sure what group that would fall under in the broader report. I didn't really see those considerations reflected anywhere specifically. And so I was wondering if that's the kind of thing that should come into play here. I think it's worth us, whether we think there are going to be data centers in Maine or not, I think it's worth having a plan in place in case that's something that comes about as a topic in the future and people want to invest here. My understanding is that there are a number of factors that make Maine an attractive place to look at for those kinds of data centers, and I think we should be on be out front on that as we think about how we'd approach that. So I'd just be kind of curious, Andrew, if you have any thoughts on that, or if the subgroup had talked about environmental considerations at all as part of your work.
Sam, I appreciate that. I am glad that you're raising it. I don't recall in work group conversations that I was in that we were able to spend time on that, but I'm very possibly forgetting. I'd hint to Nick or Jay or Dan and Scott if that was a part of any of our discussions or if it's showing up elsewhere within the report.
Yeah, no, I don't believe you're forgetting anything, Andrew. The broader, I think what you bring up, Sam, is probably appropriate to attach to the public sector group, but it wasn't something we necessarily dug into as a result of thinking about how these data centers could impact Maine's environment and some of the challenges associated with that. We did certainly talk about connectivity and how the work that Andrew is doing and expanding connectivity to hopefully everyone in the state will have implications on the work that's being done here and how constituents will interact with these systems. But more from an environmental standpoint, we didn't dive into it, but I do think this is probably a good place to add it if it's something we needed to add.
Yeah, so actually, I'm going to turn to Scott Kleiman to help me out with my memory, but this is a topic that we touched on in, I think it was the economy or in another section of our work, is it not? And wondering if we want to just make sure the points are important, but that they're also aligned in the sort of in the correct channel.
I think that's exactly right, President Dagler. And unfortunately, I think this is one of the places where we suffer that this conversation is being broken up, where we are tackling 4 of the topics today, and then our next meeting will be 2 more. So the recommendation 6 on out of the economy topic attempts to speak to some of the things that both Andrew and Sam are raising around energy and broadband infrastructure readiness and planning for that. Sam, I know you've potentially have some challenges next time, so happy to spend more time offline with you, like talking about that. I think it is a great topic to bring forward, and as in the next meeting, this group looks at the economy related recommendations to validate that this topic is represented in the way you all are just describing it now in our next meeting.
Excellent. So good insight, and think we've got it covered, but stay tuned so that as we pull all of these various pieces together, we make sure that we've covered everything. That's an important part of today's work, and then in the next meeting is to just sort of make sure that as we sort through all the channels, we haven't lost important points because we become myopically focused on workforce or healthcare or the economy or something. So excellent. Nicole, I'm sorry, Senator Grochowski.
All good. Just before we leave this subgroup, I just wanted to shout out, I'm really excited about number 3, and it's something that I have heard from constituents that they're interested in, not just because, they have questions or discomforts, but also they're interested in seeing what is an entity like the state that has a lot of leadership potential doing in a sort of lead by example framework. So I think 3 is awesome, and it also relates to 5, and it also relates to public awareness and education. So I want to like A++ that one and the synergies with some of the other things we talked about.
Okay, Dan or Scott, you got an A++ next to that, right? Good. Okay, excellent. Thank you, Senator. Other thoughts? We're closing in on the end of our 2 hours, so but I want to make sure that everybody's had an opportunity to make sure that their thinking is put on the table here for us. Okay. With that, I'll turn to Dan and Scott in a minute, but I will first remind everyone that our next meeting is on Friday, September 26th, and there we're going from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. So we're going to have a very full day. Keep your eyes out for emails from Dan and Scott on the specifics around logistics for that particular meeting. So we're going to try and get together in person, roll up our shirt sleeves, and really get some hard work done. This has been a good prelim to that, and I really appreciate everyone's efforts. Mary, I appreciate you leading us through the first half of the conversation, and it's for Mary and I, this has really been a team effort, and Dan and Scott have been phenomenal in terms of their support for our work. So let me ask one more time if there's anything else that we should be addressing here. And Dan and Scott, if you've got anything that you want to add to the closing comments of the conversation.
I'll just say thank you to you all. This is a lot of content that you all managed to get through today in a really rich way. September 26th, we are looking forward to seeing as many of you in person as we can. There will be a hybrid option, but we would really encourage seeing folks in person. We will be in Augusta, and we'll have a big space that folks can zoom into if they need to, but encourage you to join us in person if you are able. I think that's it from us. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thanks, folks.